make sure that they know where we stand as men and as Freemasons, and as in women at some places. I'm sure there are, ladies' lodges who feel the same way, that there's no reason to tell people they can't talk about these issues. And so my posts kept getting pulled down off the Facebook page because somebody would open their mouth and they would say something derogatory. One gentleman told me, I'm free to believe whatever you want, buddy, but, and that includes socialism and rainbows. And I was like, wow, I can't believe you said that to me, man. I mean, I've been nothing but cordial here. We had, of course, a good, go back and forth, of course, on Facebook. You get the notifications and you're already typing a response while the other guy's typing a response, and not arguing, but pointing out each other's, flaws in logic, and that's discussion. But unfortunately, he got a little bit I shouldn't say flamboyant. He got a little bit outside of what he should have been saying on social media, and which goes against our Grand Lodge, social media policy, which not a whole lot of people enjoy. And that was really the basis of the article. I was the first iteration of this article I had sent to somebody, and I said, "This is going live tomorrow." I was pissed because my post kept getting pulled down. I'm like, if you're going to keep censoring what I'm going to say, I'm just going to put it out there for everybody. And I'll tell you what, there are more people that follow the show and the blog page than follow the Grand Lodge of Illinois Facebook page. So you're going to be in some trouble. And not to say I was threatening Grand Lodge or anything, because it's not the Grand Lodge of Illinois' fault at all. It's these people who want to consistently bash what we would call today, in this century, in this day and age, equality. We're humans. This should be okay with humans.
Yeah, this brings up a really interesting point, because you mentioned, this idea of getting rid of old, antiquated ideas. You mentioned this idea of equality and treating people fairly. And you even mentioned earlier that you personally have no problems with ladies' lodges, or ladies in a lodge, maybe.
Well,
see, this is where we get to the crux of it, because from most people's modern perspective, which a modern perspective is informed by, in many ways, what other people think, as opposed to, morality or classical religious values or things of that nature. So, from a modern point of view, to hear kind of like the backlash against a Grand Lodge coming out against, public homosexuality is like, okay, that's good, but you've got this 800-pound gorilla sitting in the room here that nobody really is even going to talk about, right? So no women, period.
Yeah.
And there's really no equality. Like, there's equality for men, but not for the other half of the human race.
And so that's my thing is, for a long time, my wife asked one time, she said, why can't women be Freemasons? And I said, well, they can. They're just not regular,
Yeah, right.
And so it's almost this penalty, it's this dirty word, regularity. What does regularity mean? It means you pay dues. I mean, really, it means you pay dues, and maybe I don't have a charter, but we do the same work you do. I don't support, and ladies, if you're listening, men, if you're listening, I don't support co-lodges. But I would support a co-lodge in the future. I think future generations will do better, and that's based on my own experience. Like, I don't think I would act the same in a lodge if there was a female present. And I think that's just my human nature as a man who is not perfect. I think men act around men a certain way, and I think women act around women a certain way. And that's not to say that, a co-lodge could exist and there are never, like, let's say, inappropriate sexual relations between two members. I think that's a general fear of men and probably why I have on my stance. I mean, if my wife isn't a member of the lodge and I form a psychological connection with another woman at a lodge, that presents a problem.
But inherently, like, when I hear you say that, what I'm automatically thinking is, well, what about homosexual men in lodge?
Exactly. So this is where there's kind of the crux, right? This is where my mind is like the computer's fried, right? Like you ask the computer the thing it doesn't know, and there's smoke coming out of my ears. Like it's a conundrum to me why I feel that way.
Well, this is. Let me. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I feel pretty strongly about this because I was raised Jewish. I went to an Orthodox synagogue for a good portion of my youth. The men and women were forced to sit in separate sections. The women were off to the sides. The men were in the center.
Weird.
Yeah. Well, the women were in this case, sort of like second class. And so when I see this very sort of thing in Masonry, it's the same idea, because where I've seen it before is religious orthodoxy. So in Masonry, what I interpret it as is a form of, dogmatic, quote, religious, unquote, orthodoxy.
So let me ask you this then. Do you think, and, because I'm going through this in my own mind, this is probably the first time that I've had an open conversation about I'm okay with gay men being in a lodge and not okay with women being in a lodge. Like, how does that play out in my head? And so going through that, I'm thinking, what do you think it's viewed like when I say to people, I'm okay with a homosexual gentleman in lodge, somebody who's gay in lodge, right? If I'm okay with that, do you think they view that as me saying that's a slippery slope to letting women in the lodge, because the first thing they think of is just, women and as an attraction to men, or men having an attraction to men? Do you think they think it's a slippery slope?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea. I certainly couldn't speak for anybody else who's, thinking that way. I really don't know. But what I'm approaching this as is, I'm not trying to say allowing homosexuals in lodge is the same as allowing women in lodge, or they should be equivalent. I'm not trying to equate the two. But I just think it's an interesting question from the perspective of this idea of equality.
Sure.
Fraternity, liberty, equality, equality for all men to be a part of this, but not for women.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. To me, that's the tradition as it's presented to me. So I try not to, bring my modern opinion into it. But I just feel like it's an interesting question, because the way you phrased it when you said, we have to get rid of these old antiquated ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, not allowing women is definitely an old antiquated idea. Again, I'm not trying to judge it and say it's right or wrong. I just think it's an interesting perspective when we talk about excluding people from Masonry based on some inherent aspect of their being.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the issues really that I take more than even worrying about this kind of lizard brain, sexual attraction thing is almost the psychology of a man versus the psychology of a woman sometimes. I think that might play into it also. Ultimately, I've talked to co-Masons before, and they have said things to me like, a lot of times we get regular Masons who come to visit this lodge, which is a co-lodge, and they just, we let them in because they have a dues card, and we recognize them. We don't care, but they would never tell anybody they went to a co-lodge, right? Because that would violate some obligation that we have, that we were at a clandestine lodge.
That's right.
I think what's interesting about that is I've asked myself that question a lot. Would I sit in a clandestine lodge? And I, probably would. I've never had the opportunity to, and I don't live in Colorado where, the headquarters is. But I think, for me, I don't see a reason, a solid, real, logical reason. Again, logical reason. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to have logic and reason and, again, a progressive moral science. And I don't see any reason, for a gay man to be kicked out of lodge or to be expelled or anything like that. And that's the issue right now. But it will be the issue in the future. It will be the issue in the future. I think in 40 years, I've had friends of mine who have said to me, Robert, in 40 years, the craft will be XYZ, and there will be women in lodges. And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, you're probably right. And I think I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me. And I think at a point, through if we can wrangle these kind of wild thoughts and the things that are our insecurities, then I think that it goes away. I think a key is like kind of wrangling these insecurities, and then you would be totally fine with anybody being in lodge. Whether they be black, white, gay, straight, woman, man, it really wouldn't matter. I mean, there are all kinds of fraternal organizations out there that are co-orders.
Right.
We've got Golden Dawn is a co-order. The OTO is a co-order. And they're doing just fine.
Well, that's part of why I asked this question, because I think people's experience in those organizations goes to the idea that yes, people can form intimate relationships, from meeting there, but those situations often have their own kind of destabilization factors that may not be related to intimate relationships.
Right. And who's to say, honestly, as a man and a Mason, we already have intimate relationships with people in the lodge. Not on a sexual level, of course. I'm just saying, we know each other's, doubts and fears and, prides and joys. So we already have this kind of emotional contact with people. And I think, that might be something that we're kind of we're adding together. We're like, well, if we already do that with men, what happens if we had a lady into the mix? Or what happens if, there's a homosexual gentleman in lodge, and what if he starts feeling that way about another man or something? And again, those all just boil down to these kind of, reptile brain insecurities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Just for the record, I want to state unequivocally, I think it's completely wrong to exclude or kick somebody out for their sexual orientation, race, religion. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is, in Europe, some Grand Lodges permit atheists to join, and those people are also excluded from Masonry here. Even that's like an even more fundamental type of issue, right? The belief in the higher power or the grand architect. If you can allow someone like that into Masonry, where's the conflict for gender?
So, and that's what's the interesting part to me is, just kind of talking through this, I think I've had my own epiphany. Like, would I care?